Next, declarations of interest. This is the point. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest on item 8, the matter of Farnham Infrastructure Plan, as I'm a member of that committee in my capacity as leader of Waverley Borough Council.
John? Are you going to? No? Anybody else?
I have to declare the same interest.
You better say who you are.
Michaela Martin.
Michaela. Right. Anybody else? Yes, Catherine?
Catherine Powell, I need to declare the same interest.
John?
I'm on the Farnham board as well.
Okay. Yeah, Andy?
Chairman Andy McLeod, I'm also on the Farnham board.
Anybody not? No, I didn't mean that. Okay. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, thank you very much. So, Chairman's announcements. Thank you all for attending this first meeting back in the council chamber after our meetings which had to be held virtually. I would like to welcome the new members of the committee. I'd also like to welcome Councillor John Neal as a new member of the committee. Just a matter of statement, the leader of the county council has asked local committee chairman to nominate members to local bodies who've requested support. Nominations will be reviewed on an annual basis. Now, I have discussed this with the county councillors as a group, and the general principle is that there are 5 such bodies who've made this request. 4 of them are in Farnham, 2 of them, 40 Degrees and the Maltings, are in Farnham Central, and I've agreed to nominate Andy McLeod, who's been on one of those before, and so there'll be a continuation. And the other 2 Farnham ones are both in Farnham North, and I've discussed this with Catherine, and I'm proposing to nominate Catherine, and that's for the Bishop Sumner Educational Foundation and for the Hale Community Centre. And then the 5th one is a Safer Waverley Partnership. I had a discussion with Mr. Follows about that, and he sits on that as leader of Waverley. And so on that basis, I'm going to nominate myself to represent the local committee, to represent Surrey County Council. I hope everybody's comfortable with those arrangements. As I said, we have discussed this as amongst the 9 of us. Well, those who were there, 8. So everybody was in agreement that we should take that route. So we move on then to item 6, written public questions. Sorry, no, I missed out the number 5. Now this is significant. Petitions. Now, no petitions have been received for this meeting. However, there has been an exchange of views on that subject. Would you like to comment, Joe? Because I believe one of the parish councils submitted a petition, and they're arguing that it was slightly different from the one which they had previously submitted, and therefore didn't fall foul of the 6 months rule. Are you aware of this?
Chairman, I did receive an email from Whitley Parish Council a day or so ago to say that, as you said, the petition that they more recently submitted was on a different road. So I will look at that again to see whether it can be considered. Either we will take that through a different route and discuss it with the relevant officers, or it may come back to committee in November, but we need to have a proper look at that to see the best way to take that forward for Whitley Parish Council.
They're both in Paul's division, so if you'd like to comment.
Thank you, Chair. 2 comments, if I may. One is that obviously it's not ideal, because that means they have to wait quite a long time again for a resolution of this. And my request, certainly for new members of the local committee, including myself, could you distribute the petition rules so that we understand and can advise both residents and parishes within our divisions as to the appropriate way to go about this? Because from my perspective, they've put in a petition about a different road, so this is therefore different. And I think that's their perspective too. So you could circulate those rules so that we could all understand them a bit better. I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
And I have to say that I hadn't spotted that they were different roads, and so otherwise I would have stopped it before we got this far. So I apologise, Paul, for that, and I'll apologise to Parish Council when I see them next. So they just said they were saying what's happened to this petition, and because I hadn't realised they were 2 separate roads. And of course, I'm very familiar with them because they're just outside my division. So, okay, you know, I agree with that. We'll work on that a bit further.
Yes, we can, certainly it's a, you can't hear a petition within 6 months if it's on a same or similar subject. And we hadn't realised that this is possibly on a different road. So we will look at it again, and although the next committee isn't until November, we can certainly work with officers to look at how we can consider it.
So when you say same or similar subject, because of course it's almost always going to be a highways petition. So I assume the subject can't just be, there's going to be lots of different petitions about different roads, and that's okay, I would presume.
Well, I think it depends on the character of the road. In this particular case, they are roads of quite different characters.
Indeed.
And so, you know, I think that the parish council has a case.
I'm just saying if the disbarment is on, it's another highway subject, that would seem inappropriate. That's
So
all.
if the committee as a whole is happy to do this, I would suggest that I work with Paul on this as the divisional members. So we're both the divisional members. Well, it's his patch, but very adjacent to mine. And let's see how far we can move it on, you know, outside of this meeting. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, thank you. Okay, so written public questions, there certainly have been none. That one's clear cut. Written members' questions, none have been received, unless anybody challenges that statement. No, good. And so we come on to item 8, which is the key item for this meeting, the Farnham 20-mile-an-hour speed limit scheme. And so I'll just reintroduce. I'd like to welcome Elaine Martin, who's leading the whole of the project on this. It's a much wider, this is a small part of a much wider project, as she'll probably tell us, accompanied by Thomas Gers from Atkins, and he'll lead for Atkins, I guess, and your support, yes? Okay, Elaine, it's all yours. Would you like to introduce for us?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. The report which is being presented today provides an update to the local committee in respect of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme short-term interventions, previously known as Quick Wins, and seeks to notify and for approval to proceed with the statutory consultation on the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit proposals in accordance with the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and Surrey County Council speed policy. This update is being brought to the local committee and follows on from the Cabinet meeting on the 26th of January 2021, at which funding for development and implementation of the short-term interventions has been allocated and delegated to the Capital Programme Panel. The 20-mile-an-hour proposals within this report have been identified and developed in response to the problems raised by councillors and members of the public in relation to speeding vehicles in Farnham and the surrounding areas. Speed limit assessments have been carried out on a number of roads, and as a result, it is proposed that the existing 30-mile-an-hour speed limit be reduced to 20 mile an hour in and around Farnham Town Centre and on Waden Lane and Upper Hill Road. These measures aim to encourage active travel modes and help Farnham become a safer, more environmentally friendly place for those who work, live, study or visit the town. This report seeks approval for the change to the speed limit as defined. Thank you.
Okay. So, open to members to discuss. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. If I can refer everybody to page 18, Annex B of the report. My concerns are that the automated traffic count surveys were focused quite rightly on the Upper Hale Road there, but very sparsely to the east of that, and particularly in Webber and Badshot Lee. And if one looks at the furthest southeast, the survey at what's labelled Monkton Farm, what you'll see there is the Webber Road, which has 3 schools on it. The Farnham Heath End School right next to the survey, All Hallows up the top. And what's not marked on the map is William Cobbett, 2 schools there. So I'd like to understand better why this particular area wasn't even surveyed. and further to the east as well, down into Badshot Lee. And given the results, which is that traffic there does speed just as much as it does on the Upper Hill Road, why no action was considered appropriate there. Thank you.
Do you want to respond immediately?
Yeah, I'd like to ask my designers, Thomas Gez, to actually respond, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, so in terms of the proposals or the areas we've identified and are included in this report, they initially came about from engagement with stakeholders, local residents, councillors, etc., to identify these 3 areas that we've taken forward. We've focused on those areas: Upper Hill Road, Waden Lane, and the town centre, and then the various speed surveys have been undertaken around those areas to help inform the extents for each of those zones. And that has, as you can see, some of them we've surveyed outside of those areas to help inform where the boundaries should be and what types of measures are required. In terms of some of the locations, Weybourne Road and Farnborough Road, yeah, it's different measures that are included in there, which are VAS, vehicle activated signs. Yeah, that's just in response to the initial feedback that we'd received in terms of the problems in these areas.
Mark, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I'd like to. I am the ward member for the southeastern area of North Farnham on the borough and the town council. I have 2 colleagues, Dan Hunt and David Atfield, who are the ward councillors, and the Surrey County councillors here. I don't remember being specifically consulted. I do remember at every opportunity in the submissions that I've made and I've contributed to, asking for 20-mile-an-hour limits to be considered in the whole of the area, and particularly where the schools are. There's an infant school on the Badshot Lee Road, which is also in a vulnerable area. And it's particularly surprising, bearing in mind Buller's Road, which is just to the north of the Monkton Farm site, is already on this committee's radar because it's been nominated for the first safer street outside of London. So I'm just concerned that the area it wasn't even considered for an ATC. So no action seems to have been a rather predetermined outcome here.
Okay, well, we'll leave that. Andy. So noted, Mark. No, just I don't think it requires a response immediately. That's all. Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the local member for Farnham Central, and the bulk of this scheme is within Farnham Central. Well, there's part of it in North Farnham, which Catherine Powell was responsible for, and the small part in South Farnham, which my colleague Michaela Martin is responsible for. I'd like to say, first of all, I did look at the research referred to in 8.4 done by Public Health Wales, and that sets out 8 benefits of this type of scheme. And the 2 important ones are reduction in road casualties and reduction in air pollution. I won't go through all the 8, but other benefits mentioned are reduction in noise. It helps local businesses, and it helps with active travel, which is the thing that we're all now meant to encourage: cycling and walking. There's other things that I want to say. I won't go through them all. I think there's actually generally public support for this in Farnham. Certainly the residents of Castle Street Residents Association are always complaining about speeding in Castle Street. And I think there's in general public support, but there are a few concerns that people have, and I'm sure they'll come out in the discussion. It'll obviously lead to some increase in signage. And of course, we've got the conservation area in Central Farnham, and we don't want to encourage signage, so there's a slight conflict of interest there. So that's the first point. And secondly, there'll be some possibly road calming measures as well, and also things like the possible build out in Castle Street. But I would point out actually that this project, as Elaine mentioned, is a quick win and now known as early intervention, and it will be succeeded by a town centre project, which will actually be focused on improving the whole of the town centre and improving the look of the town centre. You can imagine in the future Castle Street will look a lot better once we've either been able to widen the pavements and created this cafe society that we're all looking forward to, or possibly taking the pavements out altogether and delineated the road from the pavement area by different coloured road surfaces, moving on from the sort of, the tarmac sort of thing we have now. So I generally support it, despite the reservations that people have, and I'll very, very interested in hearing the reservations that other members have about it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. In the first instance, just nice to see the officers of the Farnham board in the real world after I don't know how many meetings on Zoom over the last year. Obviously, this is in a place, but it has implications beyond the specific division. So it's good that it's come to the local committee to discuss. Obviously, I'm broadly in favour of the proposals as a member of the Farnham board, but I would ask in that capacity if the officers of the Farnham board could specifically reply offline to Councillor Merriweather to address those particular actions, because it does touch upon the wider issue regarding 20 miles an hour. Now, for non-members of that committee, this particular subject is effectively contained in a separate committee, the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. But the wider matter of 20 mile an hour zones within Waverley is something that is also important to many of us here. It certainly is to me, and I know others that aren't here. Could I have assurances from the chair that although they won't likely be contained in such a superstructure as the Farnham Infrastructure Board, that 20 mile an hour options in other parts of Waverley will be considered with as much seriousness by this committee, and would have the support of Surrey County Council where highways were behind that and the local parishes in question?
Well, let me respond to that. I'm hesitant to guarantee the seriousness of this committee, which was your part of your request. But apart from that, it's quite a separate issue, really. And any request for 20 mile an hour which comes forward to here, I would expect to be brought forward by the local member of the county council, that is, not of the committee, but the local divisional member of the county council, with the support of the relevant, since we're 100% parish, with the support of the immediate parish and any adjacent parishes which would be likely to be affected. So yeah, I mean, that's no different. Farnham or no Farnham, this is just a special case with a lot of external funding, effectively. So it's not going to utilise, well, it might do peripherally, but it's not going in principle to utilise your allocation of member resource.
Could I request through you, Chair, that officers provide the list of the process or criteria by which members need to submit 20 mile an hour requests for other parts of Waverley, so that we all understand what those requirements are and that we all go through it in a consistent way?
Well, I think it's no more than saying what we need here is what it is you want to do, exact geography of it, why, and any evidence that's supporting. And I think that's pretty well a summary of what we would normally do, isn't it? I would have thought. Okay, Jerry's next.
Thank you, Chairman, and I absolutely agree. This, there is a process that should be followed, and I'm a little bit disappointed that process hasn't been followed here in any way at all. It hasn't come through any individual member. It hasn't come through and had the consultation, the buy-in, and everything that's necessary to do it properly. If I don't know whether members have followed up some of the information that's been provided to us. We were referred to, I think it was Professor Sarah Jones, who did a Welsh report. That was a climate change agenda. It wasn't to do with safety on the roads. And an awful lot of people support the idea of 20 mile an hour zones in residential areas. That's not what's actually proposed here. The zones are not proposed, limits are proposed. I don't know whether everybody understands the difference. I'm sure Carol does, she's been around a while. But zones are where you have traffic calming, and that works, and is very popular. And I think most, an awful lot of mums and parents and grandparents do like a little bit of assurance that traffic will, although you can't actually control it, and the police generally won't enforce it, although it is enforceable once it's gone through the system. We do have a problem, of course, that you can't stop people from racing around the streets anyway. So you can't just let your kids out into the streets knowing that they're going to be safe. They won't be any safer really, but you feel a lot safer. It's much more pleasant to have cars going slowly. But of course, that's not for main roads, and we're doing it for main roads. And as Councillor Merriweather said, there's been no consultation on this. If I can quote from ROSPA, the Royal Society for Prevention of Accidents, Chairman, if I may, because I have put a lot of time into going through this. They say in a ROSPA report from 2020, it's very recent, that they consulted the Department of Transport and Atkins, surprisingly, a very good company, in 2014. And they said that the study that was done into signed only 20-mile-an-hour limits, so without physical traffic calming measures, was done, published a report in 2018, and that report was published. But they said early engagement, I'm quoting, early engagement and buy-in from relevant stakeholders, clear articulation of the scheme's rationale. And here, of course, we don't, in this instance, we don't know whether it's really a climate change agenda or whether it's a safety agenda. And if so, if the latter, why isn't there any safety data and accident data available? There's objectives and outcomes and tailoring of schemes to the local circumstances are crucial to a scheme being accepted by the public. Most people support it, but this has to be done properly. It has to be consulted upon. We haven't done that, and I'm just wondering why. Are we coming into this thing as though it's just been slapped in front of us without most of the residential areas, certainly the Chantries and Sandy Hill, and places that really benefit from having a 20-mile-an-hour limit aren't on there. It looks like it's just been put in as, hey, let's just do something. What do you think you can do? I think we need to go further and extend it into residential areas. I think it needs to be restricted so that it's not covering quite so much in terms of roads where people will be overtaking 20-mile-an-hour cars going down, I mean, it could cause danger. It hasn't been thought through. We are relying upon information and data that Andy's quoted a little bit from. I mean, there was a study which I think Elaine sent him the link to, and safeguarding the health and well-being of future generations by introducing 20-mile-an-hour limits. And that's a poster actually for a conference in 2016. 2 years later, they produced the evidence. I've got that with me, and the whole thing's completely contradictory. It's just a almost climate change activist, extremist point of view. And we need both sides of the story when we're making decisions here, Mr. Chairman. It says here that from nitrogen dioxide, the current 20-mile-an-hour, the current 231 deaths under 20-mile-an-hour, it would be 293, and they say that's a change of 63. Firstly, their maths is wrong because it's 62, but they are predicting that deaths will increase on this from nitrogen dioxide by slowing down traffic, and from fine particulate matter, deaths would drop. I don't know how this works, but the whole thing, if you put no mathematician has been near any of this stuff, frankly. There are so many things in there which are contradictory, where, really this stuff is just drawn upon, it's drawn upon summaries of previous reports of studies from all around Newcastle, Hull, Edinburgh, Portsmouth. In Portsmouth, the number of deaths increased after putting in place a 20-mile-an-hour limit. Strangely, the Welsh have decided not to report that, not to mention it. All they're saying is that, it's wonderful in making things safer, but it's not necessarily. There's a lot more to it than just, hey, let's make up a 20-mile-an-hour limit across here and make everybody happy. I think, with what we've done so far in Farnham, with the horrendous result of the COVID measures, which had to be taken out by public force eventually, because members wouldn't listen to what the public were doing for a year. We had to put up with it. The data that we're using behind this, Mr. Chairman, all comes from the surveys, the automatic traffic counts, which were done during the COVID period with COVID restrictions in place, with Farnham gridlocked. Totally atypical data, and it's not you can't base this on that sort of data. I mean, for a start, we've got to be looking at what difference does it make in a year or 2 or 5. We've got to be able to say, hey, it has made this amount of difference. How can we do that if we've started from a point we were never really at, because it was an imaginary position that came in, and imaginary traffic position? So unless we got ATCs from prior to from 2019, or from or if we do them over the coming months, when traffic's back to normal, if it ever is, then but when you put in place deliberate congestion measures, congested the whole place, and then you're taking ATCs and using that as a basis, to me, this isn't the way to go. I fully support having 20-mile-per-hour zones, but not done like this. We've got to do things properly, Chairman. I've got an awful lot to say, but I think others, I've probably had my 4 minutes or more, Chairman. Thank you very much.
I was about to point that out. Thank you, Jerry. Elaine, would you like to respond to one or two of those points?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to kind of make a statement that this has already gone through Cabinet for approval to go straight to statutory consultation in January of this year. However, we do feel that there is a need, which is why we've brought it to this committee, to have, another form of consultation with the members, additional members. It will already go through the statutory process, and there will be other opportunities for people to make comments. So this is the consultation period per se. As far as the surveys and the studies, I will pass over to Thomas again, because he has more information.
So before you do that, could you just tell us specifically what forms further consultation might take? I'm assuming you mean public consultation.
Yes, it will be. So do you want me to run
Cool.
through sort of the process?
A bit more what you have in mind, so we just have an idea.
Yeah, so the next stage after this committee, if it's approved, will be drafting all the relevant legal documentation ready for formal advertising. That will be in the media and on the Surrey web pages. Then it will go to a statutory public consultation, and there's 28 days for all the comments to be received. Then we will consider all the comments received and attempt to resolve them if we can. Then the decision to go ahead or amend will be delegated decision to our Cabinet member, which is Matt Furness. And then we'll finalise a detail design, and then obviously issue the works order, and then make the sealing of the TR.
When you say the public consultation, the last time you said it, what will be the form of that public consultation?
So it's the statutory, so it's a traffic regulation order. So it's advertised in web pages, etc., for people to make comments.
What does etc. mean?
So it goes on our web pages, it's in the media, newspapers, it's
Okay.
advertised on both, it would be Farnham Town Council web
Any mass
pages.
deliveries to the roads that are affected?
I think it's notified on the actual site, like a planning application would be.
Except
think.
we're
I'm
not
not
allowed to
100%
put up
sure.
yellow stickers anymore, so that doesn't, hopefully not like that. But yes, okay. So
it's widely
that's a
advertised.
statement of fact. So we can debate the desirability or otherwise separately, but that's where you're at.
It's a statutory
Yeah, okay.
process for
Exactly.
consultation.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you. Carol.
Yes, I'm very unhappy about what's proposed here. Many of the reasons that Councillor Hyman's raised, and I won't repeat those, but more from the aesthetics. Having written and thoroughly enjoyed writing, I'm not moaning, 2 neighbourhood plans and the FCAMP document, the Farnham Conservation Area Management Plan document, I hate seeing them completely ignored by the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. And when I read this came into a meeting we had at the Town Council, your report and everything else. I was just absolutely horrified that nobody had spoken to anybody at the Town Council about the heritage aspect of this, or anybody at Waverley. The FCAM monitoring group, which still meets, it's a very loose group, but it consists of the heritage officers from Waverley, the highwayman, the local one, Michael from Surrey, and then officers and members from all the 3 tiers that are available at the time. And Councillor MacLeod's always invited as the local councillor, county councillor. And one of the reasons we all meet, I suppose if you like, Councillor Hyman's the head and I'm just about to be the heart, but the reason we actually meet is because we love our town to bits. That's the reason we have flogged ourselves to death. We've been taken to court for the neighbourhood plan. You've no idea how we have fought for our town. and we will carry on fighting for our town. So we did a walk around the other day. Councillor MacLeod didn't make it to the end, nor did Councillor Neil, lazy people. But most of us managed to get up to the top of Castle Street, which is where this proposed build out and gate is proposed, just round the bend. So, you know, as you come around Castle Hill, those of you who know Farnham, you come around Castle Hill and you're doing that bend, and then you have to do another little bit. And that's where the gate's proposed. They're going to narrow down the most beautiful street, probably in the southeast. The castle is grade 1 listed. We have 200 and I can't remember exactly, 36 listed buildings, and they are buildings to treasure. So as you look at Castle Street, we've already got one build out, which we fought like mad, that Surrey insisted in putting up, but we fought another one on the other side, opposite, because we said the integrity of that street has to be maintained. It's a beautiful street. It's wide because it had the market. That's why it's as wide as it was. That's why we have the oranges at the bottom, and you get the vista up to the castle. The last thing we need is signage. We have gone, the first thing we did when we wrote the FCAMP document was to go through and do an audit of signage and get rid of an awful lot of rubbish that was sort of polluting the ambiance, as it were. And now we're going to have signs everywhere because of the FIP. We're going to have HGV signs everywhere. And the reason we're having signage is because we haven't got any police backing on this. And we know that it's going to be policed by signs. We know that because they just haven't got the resources. So we're going to have huge, great HGV signs. And now you're proposing 20-mile-an-hour signs everywhere, build outs on the most beautiful street, certainly in the local area. I'm sure Godalming, everybody else will claim one as well. But, you know, it is a beautiful, beautiful street. And there has been no consultation with the heritage officer. She was absolutely shocked when we walked up to where the proposed gateway is proposed. And I mean, she was almost speechless with shock. Not one phone call to the heritage officer here, no consultation whatsoever for anyone to say, you do realise that this is highly protected area, it is a conservation area. And, you know, I cannot believe that we've got this far and nobody's had the decency to phone up the town council, phone up the heritage officer, just phone somebody up and say, look, this is what we're proposing, is it okay? And I just find it, honestly, we were really quite shocked when we walked around and saw what was proposed, because I think this is my point. The devil's in the detail here. We get no board information from the FIP. Well, when we do, it's just a bit of fact at the end. It's all been through council, through cabinet, and it's all been agreed. But, you know, something like this, we could have been consulted on, and we could have said, you know, whatever you do, don't consider a build out or a gate. Whether you'd have listened to us is another matter, but at least we would have felt that we could have done that. And the reason I want to bring it up now, sorry, Elaine, I'll let you come back and answer my question in a minute. The reason I'm bringing it up now is these public consultations for TROs, nobody notices them. They're not public consultations. They're a little bit in the press that everyone thinks, oh, what's that about, and doesn't even read. I mean, I'm talking about proper consultation here. Consultation, you talk to people and you listen to people, and you don't always agree with them, but, you know, sometimes they might just have got something right. Thank you.
John.
Thank you, Chair. I broadly support the report in the round. There's obviously lots of things that we could drill down to and criticise here and there. That'll come later, I'm sure. The reason I wanted to come up was some of the points that Councillor MacLeod made just now, and I was going to focus also on Castle Street. I did actually walk to the top of Castle Street with FCAMP the other week, so I do know what the situation is there. And I do think that the FIP programme people will engage with us on the details of how we implement that. So I'm not as concerned as Councillor Coburn on those issues. I know we'd all like to be more involved all the time. The Town Council certainly is involved in the programme, so I wouldn't say that I wouldn't agree with that point either. But the specific point I was going to make on the Castle Street issue is that, and clearly it's the most sensitive street in the town. maybe even further. So it's got to be done very carefully. We don't like the build outs at the top that I'll get a mention on page 11 here. And I do think there are other ways which we can look at that and avoid something which is so significantly standing out, but will be a better solution and fit in with the other things that we're trying to do on the short-term intervention in Castle Street, which is basically to provide a bit more of a cafe culture thing going ahead. So I think that there will be some short-term measures that we can do without a huge amount of expenditure, which is what we're looking for at the moment, quick and cheap, if that's not too crude. And I'm sure that the programme will take into consideration all the sensitive aspects of Castle Street at that point. So broadly, as I say, I'm happy, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, would you like to pick up those last couple of speakers in particular?
Yes, it's just about Castle Street. There has to be, for it to work, kind of physical measures, because at the moment the traffic surveys have identified mean speeds in excess of 24 miles per hour in both directions, with northbound speeds of almost 28. So this is to control it. I have asked my designer to actually show some images. This is part of our consultation coming here. So I don't know if we can get them up on screen just to have a look in the first instance. To sort of
You look at somebody else as to whether that can be done.
Oh, that's different.
Okay.
So yeah, they could potentially be discussed further. This is the first step in the consultation.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at 28, actually. I bet I'm doing 30 when I got there, just because make sure I can get up the hill. So let's see if we've got some pictures here.
So we're also looking at rationalising the sign. So this is like the best fit at the moment. I'll pass over to my designer in a minute, but we're looking at making sure that we have minimal signs that we need, because it's an advisory. We need repeaters, etc., etc. But Thomas, if you can just come in on the actual design.
Yeah, so I agree with the points that are made. We appreciate the significance of these areas, and wanting to protect that as much as possible. As Elaine's mentioned, there is a need to introduce measures because of the existing speeds there. It has to be done to support the new speed limit. So we have considered the various measures that are available, and for this location, it was deemed that these relatively small build-outs, as you can see in maybe a bit small on the screen there, but in the top right, you can just about see the small rectangles showing the size of these build-outs. They are, as I say, relatively small. They're designed just to provide that gateway into Castle Street, highlight the change of character as you come in, which potentially will support some of this cafe culture and further improvements that we're looking at. So yeah, just there to accommodate the new signage, and some planters that we proposed there as well to soften the impact of the signage. And yeah, so once we then get into the zone, as Lloyd's mentioned, we've looked to minimise new sign, particularly new posts. So taking advantage of existing street furniture where signs are required, and then topping that up with road markings where needed.
I'd just like to kind of fill in that there is an opportunity for us to work with Town Council and Waverley to actually design, which is appropriate.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you feel that you have, I guess, statutory to have signs regarding build-outs. The most successful build-outs that I've got in my 35 square miles of the patch are the ones that lead down to Hampshire border in Greyshot. And there's a set of build-outs there which were part of the Hindhead Tunnel project, which don't have any signage as such. They've got reflectors and things like that, but and they work. So I'm just surprised that you have to do that. What forces you to do that?
Yeah, so in terms of this particular location, the need for the build-outs, as mentioned, comes from the higher speed. So we need to narrow down
that's the build-outs. Yeah.
And then the signs are required by the traffic signs regulations because it's the entrance into the change of speed limit. So
I see. It's the 20 zone. Okay.
It's the entry.
The 20 zone. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. That's the reason. Carol, you want to come back?
I really want to come back not only on the signs, which I think are absolutely frightful, but where you're going to put them. Councillor Neil tells me he walked up to the top, but I mean, these are proposed up near the Mason, what do you call it, Mason's Hall. Not being a Mason, I have no idea. Anyway, the Masonic, that's the word I'm looking for, the Masonic Centre. Right up there is where these are being proposed. It's not being proposed where the original build out was, which is more or less where the B team sort of stopped. The four of us that walked up, which was John Ward, myself, Sarah and somebody else, or four of us up there, you know, where we were standing up near the Masonic Centre, you cannot see round the bend. You know, you are right on a bend here, and opposite where you're planning the build out is somebody else's great big drive. I mean, apart from the fact that we wouldn't want any build out, if you're going to do a build out, it should be somewhere. I mean, I can imagine the danger. Anybody who comes down Castle Hill, if you get a chance to go over 20, you'll use it, and you'll bomb down Castle Hill round the castle, and then suddenly round the bend, just as you come up to the Masonic Centre, you're going to have these. And I just think it's an accident waiting to happen. I, you know, as I say, on aesthetic grounds, I think it's appalling. But on safety grounds too, I can't believe that that is the space, the bit on the road where you should be putting build outs.
Okay, Michaela.
I'm only going to talk about Waiting Lane because it's in my area of Farnham South. There are a number of schools along this road, and it will encourage active travel in the area and hopefully initiate a change to walking and cycling for school children. We've got over 2,000 school children on this road alone. So I'm broadly supportive of this proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Liz?
Thank you. Farnham obviously isn't my area, but I do know the area in question. And yes, it is a beautiful street, I have to admit. But I'd just like to say that it seems here that we're being consulted as a consultee, but we haven't really got any decision-making powers on this, it seems to me. So which is perhaps regrettable, or maybe I'm not correct on that. I think the offer to involve the towns and the borough councillors on this, I hope that is something that we can accept and firm up from this committee. I think that the signage in this area, an extremely sensitive area, is very, very important. And I'm sure with the support of the conservation group, the Farnham Conservation Group Committee, of which I know Carol is on, and also Jerry, I'm sure that their involvement would be. You know, you're not on it, Jerry. Okay. That I'm sure that, you know, their input though would be very good on this. But I just wanted to pick up a couple of points that Jerry spoke about earlier, and about the nitrogen dioxide. And whilst there are reports about, you know, increases in nitrogen dioxide, there are also an awful lot of studies that say that 20-mile-per-hour zones don't increase nitrogen dioxide, and it's only where acceleration and braking occurs that there can be increases. So obviously any traffic calming measures or traffic measures full stop have to bear that in mind. And I'm sure, you know, Atkins are very experienced at creating these particular zones. So I think it's important that, you know, that we don't sort of make it, we don't say to people that it's going to increase pollution, because that is obviously something that there needs to be an awful lot more information provided on the actual traffic calming measures in this particular area being put in place. I just wondered, unfortunately, when you put the picture up, I wanted you to zoom up the little photo because I couldn't actually see the sign that was being proposed, but it's gone off now and that's fine. But there weren't any actual road markings. And I know that within these kind of traffic calming, often there are lots of road markings as well that accompany the signage. And obviously within this, a very sensitive area, I think it's very important that something like that perhaps isn't added as well. I am broadly supportive of 20-mile-per-hour zones because despite the fact that people are saying perhaps that traffic doesn't really slow down or it might continue at the speed, it is very clear that people do feel safer in a 20-mile-per-hour zone, that it does encourage more walking and more cycling. There's been loads of studies done on that. And also that people generally do slow down. And if a child or a person is hit at 20 miles per hour, they have a much better chance of surviving or getting away with less injuries than, you know, at greater speed. So I think, you know, it's something that is the conservation area, yes, has to be protected, but also the people that that are frequenting that area as well. And I am broadly supportive of this. Thank you.
Right, now then, I want to talk about process now, because there's a series of, oh, sorry, Catherine, I missed out. Catherine, yes, sorry.
Thank you. I'd just like to talk about the proposals for Farnham North. I would say that in the FIP LLF meetings, a broad-based 20-mile-an-hour zone across the whole area was proposed. And we have held a meeting with the Farnham North councillors recently where they all thoroughly endorsed the need for 20-mile-an-hour zones around all of the local schools. As Councillor Merriweather has already said, there are a number of schools on Webburn Road, for example. Over 3,000 students a day are trying to reach that area. It's very congested. It is a huge problem. I am, like Councillor Merriweather, disappointed in the fact that there's no real traffic study that's been done along that road, certainly in recent times. And the same for Badshot Lee. And also Upper Webburn and Lower Webburn Lane were raised as rat run issues again in the LLF meeting in January this year as being areas that needed to be looked at. So I think where there was consultation, it hasn't necessarily been followed through. The people I have gone out and tried to contact local residents in regard to the proposals that have been put forward and will continue to do so in the formal consultation period. I think people are broadly supportive of the proposal outside Hale School. I think it is, you know, it's a wider section of road. People do tend to accelerate away from the school and in some cases towards the school, which is obviously of significant concern. I would say that the concern that's been raised most with me is where the zone finishes, particularly around the War Memorial. Cars travelling downhill in that section tend to accelerate away from the parked cars section anyway. And if you're leaving a 20-mile-an-hour zone, the concern is that people would accelerate further down that downhill section, which is the major crossing point to the recreation ground for children. And so the concern is that the location of the change is in the wrong place and should be further down the hill if the whole road can't be covered, but it certainly should be further down the hill and should cover the recreation ground. I've also had queries raised regarding the new VAS signs. Are they to be installed? Are they included within this proposal that's going forward, or are they covered by something different? Because they appear on the map on page 18, 2 new VAS signs, which as far as I'm aware are not there today. So I'm just seeking clarification as to whether they are covered or not. With regard to 20-mile-an-hour zones, obviously there is evidence that 20-mile-an-hour zones do increase active travel. We are keen to support people pursuing active travel. You know, as we've discussed at a number of the local liaison forums, particularly the one around North Farnham, a number of the roads have no pavements at all. Where there are pavements, they are extremely narrow. This does inhibit active travel today. Crossing is also an issue in the area. And I think that anything that can be done to reduce the speed to try to encourage people to walk is supported. I mean, at the moment, we have people who drive across Upper Hale Road because they don't feel safe crossing it. And I mean, that's insane. That's
ridiculous.
No, I mean, I have a number of elderly residents who will not attempt to cross the road because there are no crossing points.
I believe it.
You know, and it's that just has to change. That's not acceptable. So, I mean, I agree with Jerry. You know, there's a lot of conflicting evidence. I would say and would request that Atkins do review or have confirmed that they have reviewed the impact of hills. I mean, the Upper Hale Road is an extremely steep road in places. And, you know, actually interesting, Councillor Harmer raised the subject of the fact that he, you know, increases his speed going up Castle Street to make sure he gets up the hill, Well, there are bits of Upper Hale Road that are even steeper than Castle Street. So I've certainly seen people do that. And the slight concern is that the location of the 20-mile-an-hour zone might encourage that. But residents are very keen to see measures to slow traffic on, not just the Upper Hale Road, but Farnborough Road, Webburn Lane in particular. Webburn Road, sorry, Mark. Sorry, Webburn Road in particular, Upper and Lower Webburn Lane and Bagshot Lee Road, which of course weren't covered by the survey.
Okay,
thank you.
Right, now, process.
Chairman, may I raise a point of order, please?
Of course.
As a matter of the process and the legal constraints that we're under now, I know our decision making is constrained by Article 13 of the procedure rules in Waverley's constitution, but we're under Surrey's, and you know that better than I. But the issue for me here, I'm slightly concerned that whilst I've heard a number of people speaking very sensibly about this, there is some suggestion that it sounds to me from a couple of members that we should carry on regardless of the shortcomings of what we've got in front of us, and regardless of the fact there will be that we're being told there will be no real consultation. The TRO system is just objections. You put in objections, so you can't put in suggestions for improving it and that sort of thing. It's not a consultation, as Councillor Coburn has said.
So what's your point of order?
In terms of air quality, we are constrained by the Environment Act 1995. I want to know, how has the effect of these proposals on congestion and air quality been assessed for what is proposed in front of us? And I'd like to know, actually, can you tell us, are we making a decision on this? Because recommendation 2 in front of me seems to say we are, and it's our decision. And I would think we should do things properly. I want to make sure that we do things properly on this. And I think the way to make sure we do that is through our legal obligation not to make air quality worse. And we certainly haven't got an air quality action plan at the moment. And well, if this is a part of it, it's got to be in there, done properly and lawfully.
That's a very challenging statement. My observation, based on the arithmetic provided by the man who looks after my car, is that when I drive at 20 miles an hour, my emissions per mile are considerably greater than when I drive at 30 miles an hour.
And we're being told here the opposite,
inevitably. I don't know why that is. So when we're all electric, that's not a problem, of course. So this is a short-term problem, and we'll probably find we're heavily electric before we get all of this stuff done. I don't know the rate we're going, but hopefully I'm wrong about that bit too. But that's not a point of order. That's an observation, which we'll leave now.
But our legal obligation.
There's a question. No, it's a question. It's not a point of order.
Okay, I thought it was a matter of our constitutional ability to make this decision. In view of the law.
Which decision?
Well, to agree to, sorry, the second B, is it, or 2?
Agreeing to a 20-mile-an-hour limit.
Little one, it says agree that the speed limit is implemented on the road shown in those. To make that decision here ourselves without knowing the impact on air quality, I think is without assessing it at all.
The point, Jerry, is that we are, it's not saying we're doing it because somebody else is doing it. We're agreeing to it being done. That's what little 2 is about. And that applies to most of these things, actually.
It's an executive decision, Chairman.
Unless we say we don't agree. No, we're not an executive decision in this context because we don't have the money. So that makes it pretty sure we're not in an executive position. Paul.
My apologies, Chair, because I know to call a point of order under Surrey's constitution, I need to be able to tell you which clause I'm point of order against, and I can't do that. I'm not as familiar with it as I should be. But my query for clarification, if possible, is that on the electronic agenda, this is classed as executive function, item 8. And equally, the recommendations are to agree. Could you just confirm, or could officers confirm exactly the status of this decision? Because my understanding is that this is effectively consultative because the decision has already been taken by Surrey's cabinet and is effectively going to happen anyway, irrelevant of what we say here. My comment to Councillor Hyman's point would be that if we have some issues regarding the consultation, that we perhaps, I believe, use our authority here to add additional recommendations that could give more weight to that consultation and make recommendations as to how we would like to see that consultation taken forward.
And when we get to each of these items, then we can have a debate about it, so long as we don't run out of time, which is why I wanted to discuss the process right now, because there's a number of members who would like to come back. I think I would prefer that we now look at the specific items that we're asked to consider. And if you want to debate individual ones of those, that's fine. But I think we should move on from the general discussion which we've just had, which has been very interesting, and different views. So that we should go to and look at each of these and decide whether we want to be for or against each of the things we're asked to consider. Catherine.
Sorry, Councillor, I was just wondering if Elaine could clarify the question I raised around.
No, I was going to ask her to do
Okay,
that. Yeah.
thank you.
Would you like to come back on there were 2 or 3 things that you wanted to come back on, I think.
Sorry, coming back to Councillor Powell. As part of the consultation that we're going to be doing, as part of the statutory consultation, your considerations have been noted and we'll use them as a response or amendment to design. I don't know if Thomas wants to come back about the VAS signs.
Yeah, so the VAS are, I guess, a little bit different in terms of process. It's, you know, it's not covered by a traffic regulation order or a speed limit order, so it's not necessary to apply for that or, you know, advertise it and invite a response to that, but it is part of the proposals that we are looking to progress. So, sorry, so, yes, so the VAS signs are part of the scheme that we're looking to progress.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so members, are you happy for me to start to go through the specific items that we're invited to say yes or no to?
Only, could we just have clarification on what options we have? Because we've got some options here in front of us in the paper, which say that we can do nothing, or we can go ahead with part of, or all of, like all 3, because it treats them as 3
yes,
separate
no, or
things.
comment, I would say.
All right. If we can do that, then surely we also have the power to say, we want to consult before we make any decision on this. We want it done right. We want the horse before the cart, rather than the wrong way around. I mean,
well, that would be a comment, not for us to consult, but for consultation to occur.
yes, exactly. Yes, thank you. Because we haven't been consulted, and this isn't a consultation. When you get 4 minutes in a chamber or whatever you allow, Chairman, kindly.
No, I think what we'd be saying is further consultation should occur, would be the phraseology. And that would depend on how best it was considered to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, Liz.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering whether or not it's pertinent at this point to perhaps suggest some additional recommendations within this section as well.
Well, let's see how we get on with these first. I mean, if everybody's saying no,
can you come back to me once we've come through these, and I could just suggest some others?
Remind.
And I think your garage man was incorrect, I'm afraid, about the emissions at lower speeds.
I'm sorry, you're wrong, and I'm happy to quote from the background document from the Welsh study, which
there's lots of other studies. I've just looked at the government website, so there are lots.
But it's difficult to imagine why it would be thus, since the engine is a question of how fast the engine is moving.
it's to do with
Not
gear
how fast
ratios.
the wheels are moving. So the engine is moving at a certain speed, and if you're in a lower gear, it doesn't get you as far for the same engine speed.
Well, surely that assumes that the 20-mile-an-hour limit hasn't encouraged you to get out of the car and use another means of transport.
Oh, no, there are other reasons for having a 20-mile-an-hour limit. I don't disagree. I'm just commenting on actually, as things stand, if I drive at 20, I produce more emissions than if I drive at 30. But that doesn't go up indefinitely. When I get above a certain speed, I use more emissions because of the effect on how the engine operates. So, you know, that's all I'm commenting on. And I know how it is on my extraordinarily low emissions vehicle, according to the reports, despite its age. So if we look first of all at question 1 is, are we happy to note the results of speed assessments undertaken to inform the development of the 20-mile-an-hour proposals as included in section 2?
Happy to note, so it's not a problem, but
Yeah, it's yes or no. I mean, that's a matter of note. Are we happy
Yes.
to note them? Yeah, okay. That's, thank you. Right, so item 2, which is where we can have a different conversation. Agree that a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is implemented on the roads shown within figures 1 to 3 in Annex A in accordance with option 1, brackets, see section 3 options, close bracket. So are we going to agree that it's implemented? Carol?
No, I can't agree with that as it stands, because this is my fear, that if we agree everything, we just stamp it through. It's already, we've been told it's gone through cabinet. We're just going to get every single thing that we've got in this report, because there's no other way that we've got to change it. So I would like to add something, whether this is what Councillor Townsend was talking about, that there has to be consultation with the heritage officers for the installations in Castle
So we
Street.
say subject to.
Well, I don't know how, yeah,
is
word
the
it
way
as
to do
as
it.
you wish,
So
Chairman.
this is an amendment.
Yeah, because if we just, you know, if we agree it implemented on the road shown within the figures, then all the things that I don't think would work in Castle Street. I mean, we're talking at this barrier, it's within touching distance of a grade 1 listed building. Masonic Hall is a mere grade 2.
Okay,
So you know, we do need some
okay.
consultation.
So let's just make a note for now that we need to add a subject to that consultations with the heritage officers of some sort. We'll come back to wording in a minute. Let's see what else. Paul.
So yes, also the divisional ward members, I believe, have been consulted, but I think they should also include something along the lines of, well, firstly, one road at least, Councillor Merriweather was asking to be considered as part of this and hasn't. So, I mean, we should be thinking about additional wording to do that. I go back to my original question, Chair, though, in terms of standing. If this has already gone through Surrey County Council's cabinet, do we have some assurance that our recommendations or amended recommendations have any point whatsoever?
Well,
otherwise we're all just talking here for hours and hours and hours about something that's actually already happened. And as much as that frustrates me to the core, is it worth us putting these down here for them to be, it's not just ignored, they've already done it. So what's the point of all of this?
Elaine.
If I may, my understanding is.
Elaine.
I just wanted to kind of make the point that that's why we're here, just making sure that we capture obviously other members' kind of comments and making sure that by the time it gets to the TRO process, we've captured them early. So.
And that's why we invited Elaine and her people.
Yeah, and just to be minded, the cabinet paper to award money towards the quick wins or short and long-term interventions is time limited. So we can't kind of expand this too much and take too long. It is a, you know, we're trying to get other elements of Farnham addressed, and these are the early interventions that we're trying to.
And in fact, as I understand it, these are sine qua nons, these ones. If we don't do this, we won't be able to do.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, but they are being looked at holistically as a place for Farnham. So it's not, they're not in their own box.
No, but you have to get up that step before you can reach the next step.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right, Jerry.
Thanks. I thought we were going to take an integrated approach. I mean, we have been told repeatedly by the Farnham board and the Surrey officers that we are going to, I know that Councillor Follows and our MP have brought these up as much as anybody else, to their credit, that we will have modelling, we will assess the likely consequences before we consult the public, and then we will consult the public properly, and we will then act upon what the public have said, obviously, you know, within reason. You know, we can't give away money or whatever, but we're doing the opposite here, completely the opposite. And as far as I'm concerned, what we have to do with this recommendation is say we want advance full public consultation. We want to know where the public want other measures put in the estates around town. We want to know whether or not we are going to put 20-mile-an-hour measures around all of the schools or not, because we don't want to do this piecemeal separately over a number of years, adding bits in and taking bits out. We want the traffic calming measures, if they're necessary, to be detailed in advance and consulted on. You know, we've got to have something that's specific to put in front of the public and the heritage officers, and that's what we should have had. I mean, I was very, very pleased with the quality of the report, actually, when I saw it in the first place. It's having read the background information that isn't our officers' responsibility, that that I've been very, very, concerned about where this is headed. Because obviously it's gone away from the idea of it being about safety, and the safety aspects are laudable, but there's no safety data in here to justify this decision, Chairman.
Let's stop there and let's see what other people say. Liz.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say I support Councillor Coburn's addition to the recommendation to include the heritage officers, and also I'd like to add the town and relevant borough councils, which we spoke about earlier. So if that could be added on as well, please.
We'll draft an amendment and then we can debate the amendment.
Thank you.
Catherine.
I'd like to accept the proposals, but I would like to make it subject to some analysis on what happens to the speed at the boundary of the limits, because that's what's really worrying me, where some of them actually terminate, and it's mainly an issue for the South Farnham and the North Farnham proposals, where the area terminates in the middle of a residential area. I just don't want to see that then encourage traffic to travel faster, and I can't see any data on that. And I would
you like to think of some words that we could add just while we carry on debating? Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Kevin.
Very quick point, and I think it's been an excellent debate. My question is, are there any timescales that could actually catch us out if we're not careful with funding?
Yes.
Because and there's lots of points that have been made that I really agree with. But we just mustn't lose sight. If there's a date that actually that funding stops, you could end up with nothing at all. Yes. So if that can be clarified, so I think we should know, is that weeks, months or years? Thank you.
Elaine, do you know the answer to that question?
I'll have to come back on that. I know it sounds awful. There's such a big programme and they've all got different timescales. So if you wouldn't mind, I think
it's a huge risk issue with money which is not Surrey's. So and that's why I was concerned about, if I added together all the pieces that Jerry was talking about, I think the answer is no to item 2. Jerry?
Thanks. My understanding, Chairman, is that the funding that was agreed for this was in the budget process in February, the annual budget process. That was the decision that was made to spend, I think, £2.5 million or whatever. And on top of that, we've got the £500,000 that was saved up from the car parking funds, which has been effectively been transferred from our hands to the to Surrey County Council, to Tim Oliver. So I cannot see why. It sounds to me like we're being held to ransom, but being told that you've got to do this or else you lose the money and nothing will happen. Well, we've had £250 million promised to Farnham and things done properly, and to be sat here and to be told, oh, if you don't agree to this and not doing it properly, then we're going to take the money away. Is this a joke game that we're playing, or are we serious about doing things for Farnham?
My understanding is, and I actually don't disagree with you at all, Jerry, I really don't. My understanding is that some of the money that's actually budgeted and was budgeted by Surrey County Council was money from outside sources and requires us to do things in a certain order, in a certain way. And that these things here are dependencies to things further down the line, which again is more funding allocated by Surrey, but comes from an outside source. So the wider point here is a lot of what's been budgeted is from outside sources that they haven't actually got guarantees they're going to get, which I agree is completely a huge issue.
Are you saying section 106? Is that what we're talking about?
I'm not saying section 106. I'm saying transport money, Department of Transport money, that kind of sort of scale of thing. It's money that has been figured out by the project team as what's required, but it's not necessarily sitting in Surrey's bank accounts ready to spend. That, not to get too on the side, but that's one of the bigger problems I've had with this project, is because it's allocating money we might not ever get, or even theoretically ever see or have a chance of getting. But that's why the speed is what it is for this. In order for us to have a chance to get that funding, has to be done in the right way and in the right pace. If I've misrepresented that, any of the officers present, please do shout. But that was my understanding.
Yeah, that's a fair representation, I think. I would say, yeah.
I've obviously come into this recently, so this is my knowledge to date. There's a £1.1 million of feasibility funding in our revenue pot, and then there's 2.5 for the quick wins in the capital pot. Yes. Of that, £1 million is to be spent in 2021-22, and then 1.5 is to be spent in 2022-23.
Yep.
That's my.
Yes, but the source of that money is not council tax or borrowing, or the capital can be borrowing. The capital's borrowing. Yeah. Yeah, capital's borrowing.
Yeah,
to
we've
some
also,
extent.
as part of the second stage, which is the medium-term interventions, the long list of quick wins, which we've all discussed, well, we will be discussing on Monday with members. That has a mixture, so that does have 106, and we will be applying for SIL funding. So that's what Councillor Follows was referring to. Yeah, some of them are.
Yes. So some and some. Yes, I mean, it's an opportunity. The whole project is an opportunity that we can grab at or wait until there's another opportunity arises, actually, is what it boils down to. And so far, Farnham overall has opted to push Surrey to grab at with various support. I would put it like that. Now, whether that's desirable or not is, I'm not going to take a position on, because Farnham's, okay, as far as this committee is concerned, yes, it's all of our responsibility on behalf of Waverley, but I think that Farnham are the best judge of that. That's been my view. And I know you have mixed views about that as well. So what we're trying to do is to see how much we can agree about. And so I think it's fine to put in some provisos on some of these things. But I think, if you really want to end up saying no, say no now. We can save ourselves a lot of time. If you want to,
Can't we just say, is there an option, Mr. Chairman, of saying yes, subject to doing it properly?
Well,
and it doesn't have to take forever to get a public consultation through.
That's exactly what we're trying to work out how to do. So we're taking item 2 and saying subject to. So first subject to is, do you want to say approval from the heritage officers to, or detailed level approval?
Certainly, I hate the word consultation because it doesn't mean anything, does it? So detailed discussion, subject to the agreement of. Well,
agreement is
like that.
better than discussion.
It is. Let's have agreement, please, with the heritage officer. Yes, please.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of the heritage officers, isn't it? So, so supposing we add a subject to the agreement of the relevant heritage officers, do you want to define them or not? Is this Waverley's heritage officer?
It's Waverley's heritage officers. They're all three are up to speed.
Okay, subject to the agreement of Waverley heritage officers. Would we agree to adding that in as a principle? Okay, right. Now then, there was another suggestion, I think from Liz.
And also, again, consultation sounds is a very weak term, but I would like the towns and boroughs, relevant borough councillors also involved with the heritage officer and the final design for what the this is going to look like. Well, it feels that from conversations here that not all of the town councillors have been involved. Well, no, Jerry's shaking his head behind you, so I can only take it from the mood in the room.
John may be able to help us with this.
Well, look, there is consultation going on all the time. We all want more. We're sometimes critical of how it goes on, but consultation does happen. The team have been to Farnham many times and presented. They're coming again this coming week. And we can go into more detail on this, I'm sure, in the appropriate time there. So I'm not concerned that we're not consulting. I'm quite happy, and it makes sense to bring in the heritage officers. Yes, let's get on with it. And, we are consulting. Thank you.
Catherine?
I was going to talk about the other one you asked me to draft. Is that?
Oh yeah,
okay,
yeah. Well, no. Let's have a look at this one. Yes.
Okay, it's a lot longer. I'm sorry.
Well,
but,
see how you do.
Subject to review of the impact of on the boundaries of the 20-mile-an-hour zone in residential areas to ensure that there is no potential to increase speeds in these residential areas, and if this is identified, the area should be considered for extension. It's a bit long. Sorry.
No, I'm just thinking about clarity rather than. I think within areas, I would have said rather than in areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit more precise. Sorry. Yes.
No, I just wanted
Chair.
to, when you spoke before, you talked particularly about Upper Hale Road and the hill, but you're
It's true at the other end as
drafting
well.
something more generic.
Yeah, because when I've actually sat and looked at all of, I mean, I've obviously spent more time looking at the North Farnham map because that's my division. But when you actually look at all of them, there are a number that are on roads where when you sit and think about it, it could have the same impact. And it has been raised by a former traffic officer who happens to be retired and lives in my division. So I think I would like to see it checked because we don't want to make things less safe. That's absolutely the reverse of what we're trying to do.
Yes.
Chairman, Eva, can I ask if other members are happy for Councillor Powell to read that out more slowly so I can make a note of it, or if you can give it to me on a piece of paper, that would be great.
But, well, you can hand it over to her on a piece of paper when you're ready, but just reread it so we can all hear it slowly.
Sorry. Subject to review of the impact on the boundaries of the proposed 20-mile-an-hour zones in residential areas to ensure there is no potential to increase the speeds in these residential areas. And if this is identified as an impact, the area should be extended.
Yeah, okay, so there's likely to be an acceleration. I'm just thinking what happens on the road I talked about by the Hampshire border in my area. What happens is that at one end, people continue to behave, coming out of 20 into 30, they continue to behave themselves. I have to say at the other end, they don't. Once they get outside the 20, it's 40 probably. Yeah, so that is a risk, I agree. But how you manage that, I don't know.
I don't know, but the risk that was identified is the 20-mile-an-hour zone for North Farnham finishes at the War Memorial,
Yeah, no, I see
which
what you
is
mean,
the start of
yeah.
the recreation ground and includes a crossing.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't seem to make an
Well,
enormous amount
wouldn't
of
it be
sense.
simpler to suggest that it be considered for extension, full stop?
Yes.
In that case, because
Yeah.
that would be the logical thing to do.
Yes.
So you're covered for the wreck.
Yes.
I have
And the
used
bend,
wreck, actually.
because that's the other thing that worries me is that you've got the wreck and then a sharp blind bend.
Yeah.
You know, don't want-
Carol, you know this.
But what I was actually saying, it's the other way as well, you know, because what worries me about the build out and the slow at the 20 mile in Castle Street is it's just literally round the bend. Now, surely what you're going to have there is people coming down the hill, as I say, Castle Hill, at whatever speed they're coming down, and then suddenly coming this gate. So, I mean, the knock-on potential, and what I don't want, please, is another 500 signs the other side telling everyone to slow down because the road narrows. But, you know, potentially, you're not going to see this gateway until you've got to brake.
Well, what we could do is to make the amendment that there should be further consideration of the exact positioning of the boundaries of the 20 zone in order to ensure safety. Because that's what we're talking about in every case, I think.
Yeah, I would like to just include the phrase somewhere, you know, to prevent, you know, people putting their foot down. It is the people putting their foot down as soon as they've left the zone that frightens me, when that's still in a residential area. And as Carol said, you know, in some respects, you could put the sign the other side of the castle. If it was on the north side of the castle, then that issue would be resolved because, you know, the traffic would have already slowed down. Sorry.
Okay. Well, yes, Elaine. Yeah, sorry, yes.
Thank you, Chris Greenwood from Atkins. So I think we have some, there's an additional speed survey point covering part of the area that you were referring to. I think that shows that the average speed is more than 24 miles an hour. So I suppose I'm just making the point that if we are to extend the limit, we will need to consider or include physical measures. So I'm not sure if everybody understood the conversation earlier, but the way this work has been done is if in the survey, it recorded an average speed of less than 24 miles an hour, the policy indicates that you can rely on just putting a sign up to denote the speed limit. If it's more than 24 miles an hour, you need some complementary physical measures.
Engineering measures is what it says in the legislation.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, if you want to consider extending the zone, then we may need to look at physical measures and not just putting a sign.
Doesn't tell you where you have to do that, actually, the engineering measures. And I would argue that the engineering measures are already in your plan. It's just that the 20 limit is too close to them. So there needs to be a bit more gap before. And I think that's a general comment, actually, that if you move the 20 sign back a bit away from the engineering measures, which you're planning anyway, then you're more likely to get cooperation from the users. Yes.
Yeah, just in terms of the designs we've developed, they're informed by the guidance and the requirements for these speed limits, which sets out the distance between traffic calming measures if you are looking to bring in those lower speeds. So positioning of the currently proposed extent, if that were to extend further east, then equally the traffic calming measures would extend further east with it. It does need to be defined distance between those measures.
Well, that's, yeah, I mean, that's a matter of thought, isn't it? And precision or not. I think there are opportunities there, is what I'm getting at. You can be a bit more flexible than on the face of it. It's saying as soon as you hit 20, you've got to have a great big build out. That's not true. I mean, what happens in some places is not quite like that.
Yeah, can I just suggest that we do look at that proposal and see what we can do to extend it a little bit further?
Well, one of the things is that you can have a mini build out to start with. I mean, again, I'm thinking of a road, a specific road where this happens, that there's a mini build out and then an intermediate one and then the real build out. And actually that works. People react to that arrangement quite well. And where very close by, there's not that arrangement, then they don't behave very well. They do accelerate in the way that Liz was describing, or Catherine was describing, sorry. Liz.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say, I'm very aware that people have local knowledge and they're very, very aware of the speeds and the different needs of the community and that, and the uses the community make of particular roads and crossing points and whatever. So which is why I come back to my original point, which is if they consulted with the local members and that consultation goes forward, then they can talk about this. They can, if we say, and that's really what we're saying here, we're saying that local information and local knowledge needs to be brought into play. I'm very aware that there are time constraints on this money, and whilst if it goes to the local members, and I know that John Neal's saying that there's enough consultation, it doesn't feel to me as if there has been enough consultation on these individual areas. So I think what would be really good is if we could just agree that the local members, local borough members and the town council members do have an opportunity to input through the team these individual concerns, and then they can see how best these can be taken forward, because I don't think within this committee we're going to be able to agree whether or not we're going to extend boundaries. We don't know what the implications that will be on the funding, the implications that will be on further reviews, etc., etc. So I think I would like to see the recommendation being that these issues are taken forward separately through consultation between the town and the borough councillors. Thank you.
Carol? Oh, I thought you were singling. No, I'm just thinking we could add on to your heritage bit and further consultation with the local representatives at town and borough level.
Yeah, I mean, that would be absolutely fine. And I mean, the irony of all of this is that the FCAMP group contains all of that. That's what it's made up of. The local county councillor, the local town and borough councillors, the heritage officer. We have a little group ready made. All you got to do is pick the phone up and one of us will talk to you.
Well, that's easy for the town council to organise, I'm sure. So, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. No, that's actually the point I wanted to make about consultation, is because it seems that the consultation that I've been engaged with has been through Farnham Town Council, through Waverley Borough Council, not through FCAMP. And it seems to me the effective and efficient way to deal with this is to have more personal, direct consultation with the ward, the division councillors.
Can we get a general agreement that we add that into the subject to, Catherine.
I wouldn't like, I mean, I don't sit on town council or borough council, so I
No,
mean.
I mean all
yeah,
levels, yeah.
All the
Ta-
councils,
town-
yes.
town-
Yes,
Town, borough and county.
perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I
represent-
don't expect a running commentary, but I don't think characterising the consultation so far as being as direct and bilateral
Oh, okay.
is
But
accurate.
if we put a
yeah.
subject to,
Yeah.
then that should cover all of that. So so all levels are involved in representing their people. Is the idea? Is that all right? Okay, that's manageable, is it?
I'd just like to ask the question really, because it's just a little bit unclear. Obviously, we've already got approval to go to statutory consultation. Could I use your comments as part of that? Because obviously there's delay. I'm not.
Yeah, because we want to get on with it. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I will do it as the process anyway, and we can't seal an order anyway until all objections and comments have been discussed, etc. So it is part of the process. I will obviously speak to Heritage and I will look at the extension with my colleagues of those elements. So it is
Yes,
kind of,
there's-
is it a yes subject to?
So that's the
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
saying,
right, okay.
I'm suggesting we add to it, subject to the bit about the heritage officers, which you've got already, and further consultation with representatives at town, borough and county level. Is that Paul?
And one other thing I'll just drop in is it's probably in the interests to do that anyway. I know it's been approved by Surrey, but the SIL board is a Waverley Borough Council entity,
Yes.
some of which are members of in this room and will probably not be in favour of granting SIL to things that they haven't felt consulted on.
No, absolutely.
So just as a practical matter.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So
And
this-
we've seen that elsewhere, that SIL has not been accepted. Yeah.
So just to be clear, this isn't SIL for this particular, for this bit, but we are consulting.
Yeah, but you don't
on
want them to stop you later on, do you either?
No, it's okay.
That's the point. And Paul's right. Yes, as I say, we have seen elsewhere that there's been difficulties, let's say, with getting things to happen, which we thought had been agreed because the members had not been consulted properly. Yeah, so they have a bit of. So, given all that, would you be happy with paragraph 2 or recommendation 2? Is that agreed?
Can
Yeah.
I read out the recommendations?
Yeah, you better have to. Yeah.
So the recommendation that you were just talking about was agree that a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit is implemented on the roads shown within figures 1 to 3 in Annex A in accordance with option 1, brackets see section 3 options, subject to agreement with Waverley heritage officers and further consultation with town and other relevant borough
So town, borough and county.
and county councils on the
Members.
final design.
Councillors.
Councillors rather than
Yeah,
councils.
we don't want councils. No, we don't. All these other people involved.
Chairman, I'd like subject to amendments because certainly the issue of Castle Street and other places, we know that amendments are necessary. I don't want it to be simply subject to agreeing with some members and others being ignored. We want specifically amendments to be made to this and it to be accepted now that we are not accepting what is there in figures 1 to 3 in Annex A.
I think you're being drowned out, Jerry.
I think that's Councillor Baker. She likes to do this at this time. Keep us on our toes, wake us up.
Well, what exactly do you have in mind?
Sorry, I think I just said subject to amendments. I'd like the word amendments put stuck into the middle before we get to, at the start of the subject to bit. Certainly. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Chairman, I'm very unhappy with the idea that promises have been made to residents they're going to be consulted. That means that we as members are going to have to individually consult our residents because we've made that promise. We want to show that we can be trusted and that, obviously if we don't, we've been told, all the residents have been told, we are not going, Surrey County Council is not going to implement anything without consulting the residents properly and assessing the consequences. So I'm not going to vote for this anyway in favour. I appreciate the efforts that everybody wants to push it through is making, but unless we stick to our promises, Chairman, you know, we have to have some principles here.
And if you go down your line, we've killed it anyway, Paul.
I think I'm sort of obliged to say, having spent, I think, 5 to 7 sessions of local liaison forums with local residents that were done, I mean, and Councillor MacLeod, Councillor Neil and others chaired them. There were multiple sessions with residents. So I think I would ask if people are asking for additional consultation with residents, that they do specify what that actually is that they want. Because there were sessions held, even during the pandemic, there was significant effort was made by the board to consult with residents. So I think my direct question is, if there's more consultation that you want, can you spell it out so that we don't get
well,
into
I
this position
did,
again?
Chairman, the leader's made a good point there, but I remember it was either at the last of our meetings or the previous meeting. I asked that we be provided with the results of the consultations that have been done already, and that hasn't been provided. Councillor Stephen Spence is no longer a member of this committee, obviously, did say we will get the results. I've had absolutely nothing. We have no idea, and the public haven't been consulted. In fact, they were roundly ignored and told that, well, that's one opinion and there are others on virtually every matter. And certainly on the COVID measures. How on earth can we make a decision to go forward based on speed measurements made during the COVID times? I think it's a joke.
Well, we can say no. Yes, go on.
Could I just clarify that the speed surveys were undertaken during the pandemic, but they were also undertaken in June and July of this year?
Okay, still pandemic.
The COVID measures were in place?
Relaxed, yes. Now, wait a minute, we've got 2 or 3 other people. Liz first.
Can I just say that Jerry proposed that the recommendation, the word consultation was changed to amendments. I wouldn't support that. I think it's enough to have consultation. You can't assume there are going to be amendments. It has to be a consultation. So I wouldn't support that. I can understand why you might want that, but I wouldn't support that, and I would support just the consultation.
Well, more to the point, we can't really put subject to unless we have a specific amendment to the whole strategy. Nobody's proposed that at the moment. Catherine's edged towards that, but not specific. Catherine.
I'm happy to leave as consultation, because I recognise that the highways officers will ultimately have the say on what they think is safe and what isn't. But I would say that in the LLFs there was a lot of discussion, particularly in the North Farnham LLF, which I presented at, so I know what was discussed in that meeting because I was there and I was presenting. And in that meeting we did quite clearly state that we would like a 20-mile-an-hour zone considered across the area, and we did identify a number of roads, not just the Upper Hale Road as being the road at risk. So I think that it's a wider action for the FIP team to take that, that consultation into effect. It obviously hasn't fed into the speed survey that was implemented, which is disappointing, but it is where it is, but hopefully can be covered by future work. Thank you.
Carol?
I don't really want to prolong this, but just going back to the LLFs, if you actually count the individuals there, it's very, very few people who've actually attended all the LLFs. I can't remember the figure, but I did count it and I've asked for further details. Councillor Fowler says, how do you consult with people? Well, you can do it several ways. You can have a big survey monkey on the town council. You can have Catherine Powell's North Farnham voice. You can do it in all sorts of ways, but we don't do it. That's the whole point. It's not happened. You could walk down any street in Farnham today, speak to the first person and say, do you know anything about the Farnham infrastructure programme? And they'd look at you absolutely blankly. If you think this is a burning matter of conversation in our local pubs because everyone feels thoroughly consulted, you are totally wrong. There's about 100 people who are sort of focused on it, if you're lucky. And, we do need to take people with us. We said this at the town council meeting. If this is going to be a success, we have to take people with us. And at the moment, we are not taking people with us on this, even if they half agree, because they are not being consulted and things are not being followed up. It is being run as always. And this is what people will tell you in the town. We were told it was going to be different this time. It's exactly what Surrey always does. They do what they want to do, and Farnham just has to take it. Now, if we don't want that to be the truth, then we have to actually talk to people.
John and Paul.
I'm sorry, I think this is getting a bit out of hand. You know, there's been masses of consultation, more than anyone has ever seen, I think. Not everyone will engage with it, obviously. We've had leaflets in every household's door. We've done endless things to consult with the public. And though everyone's had an opportunity to come along and be involved in it. So I think we just need to move this debate on and
Okay.
support what's going on here and get on with it.
As a general statement, my analysis of this from discussions knocking on doors is that most people think that they elected councillors to represent their interests, and we should just get on with it. But it may be different in Farnham, I don't know. Paul.
I'm sure everything is always different in Farnham. That's certainly been my experience over the last 3 years. I think the point is, I actually do agree with Councillor Coburn, but that goes back to my comment from Councillor Hyman. If we're going to specify additional consultation, we should actually specify what additional consultation we want and what form that it's going to take. Because if you don't think that the LLFs have been enough, or that the leaflets have been enough, or the fact that actually for the first time probably ever that the 3 councils involved in Surrey, Waverley, Surrey and the Farnham Town Council are actually working together on this. If you don't think that's sufficient, that's entirely your opinion, but specify what type of consultation you want. Otherwise you will likely get back here next time and all be unhappy that the consultation that then happened, because we asked for more consultation, wasn't exactly the type of consultation that you wanted. To specify what you want in this recommendation so that they can go and do that, evaluate those results and move forward. Otherwise, we're just going to go round and round and round in this circle where we do different consultation, that not everybody thinks is appropriate or valid. So you made a number of comments about types of consultation you'd like to see. Amend it, put it up.
Or we leave it to every individual member to arrange what they think should be the consultation arrangements in their area, which is what I would expect to happen. Yeah, I mean, that's the only way that makes any sense, because we all have, otherwise we'll have 18 different solutions. So I'm now going to move to either say yes or no, as Joe read it out, or is going to read it out again.
Yes, so recommendation number 2, subject to agreement with the Waverley Heritage Officers and further consultation with town and other relevant borough and county councillors on the final design.
Right, let's just see. Those in favour, please raise. Against? Right, carried. Thank you very much. Right, now we move on to what follows from that. So little 3 is the appropriate advertisements, and I think that's sort of automatic, really. So can we just nod that through? Is that okay? Agreed. Thank you. And then authorise the delegation authority of the area highway manager in consultation with the chairman, vice chairman of the local committee and the local divisional member to resolve any objections received in connection with that. For the benefit of those who haven't been around, that's what we do for a number of things, mostly rights of way, actually, when people are trying to stop footpaths or create or force new ones, but it applies to the roads as well. Yes, Paul.
Just for clarification, as the actual core activity is within Councillor MacLeod's division, I assume if you get objections that relate to consequences of this that actually impact Farnham North or South, you will consult with the other 2 county councillors.
Yeah, well, that's very important actually, because a lot of Catherine's concerns, and by the way, mine as well, are to do with what the implications are for diversion route, effectively. Yeah.
Chairman, are the objections public? Sorry.
If I could just add to what Paul was saying there, we'd also consult with the borough and town councillors as well in the appropriate areas, not just the. I'd just like to make a general comment, because I think this has been a very good meeting actually, and in itself it's a big consultation actually, as Elaine said at the beginning. But there's practicalities to getting involved with the borough and town councils, but I think we have to do it. And I think the lesson to be learned here, if I can say to the programme team, I agree with John Neal, there has been an awful lot of consultation. In terms of this type of consultation, I think as much has been done as is possible. But when it comes to specific proposals like this one, I think there should have been a bit more consultation with the borough and town members, and even with the county councils, to be honest. And I think that's the lesson for the programme team. I'm not being vastly critical because this is an amazingly big project and there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. I think it would have been worth doing a bit more consultation on the specific proposal with the three levels of councils, because it's a three council project. It's a Surrey, Waverley and town project. And they probably should have been a bit more concentrated, but you're doing it now. And this committee has agreed that we need to take that further. But that will involve you guys with a bit more work actually, because before you can go out to your legal consultation, you'll now be asked to take into account the views of the borough and town councils. And I think that's right that happened. And it probably should have happened a bit earlier. And I'm really not being critical because, you know, there's new people involved. It's an enormous project. And there are very good people involved. You know, as Jerry said, Atkins is a very good company, and so on. And so I think there's just a little bit of a lesson to be learned, Elaine. And for all the future projects, I think we need to not be discussing it here, but be discussing it a bit earlier.
Yeah. You mean the sub-projects or the general?
Yeah, this is a sub-project of the overall project.
Yeah,
and on enormous projects, like Surrey's consulting on the local transport plan, and you know, heaven knows how many of the 1.2 million Surrey residents will respond to that. It probably won't be very many, and Surrey will do their best to get responses. And equally in this project, I think the county has done their best to, you know, send questionnaires to every household in Farnham. There's been the LLF meetings and so on and so forth. And I think the general consultation has been good. But I think when it comes to specific projects, it should be a bit more, and it should be through the local members mainly, because they are elected, as you said yourself, Chairman, to represent the population. Thank you, Chairman.
And by the way, as the member who has nearly all the non-Farnham adjacent parishes, it wouldn't be a bad idea to consult them in some cases where it's relevant, because they feel somewhat left out of the whole discussion. Do you really want them to go shopping in Farnham, or are you telling them to go away? You know, for example, do you want them to continue to do their business in Farnham, or do you want them to find somewhere better? You know, that sort of question has been raised in some of my parishes who are adjacent to Farnham. So occasionally it'd be nice to have a quick word with them just to see how they feel.
Is it your job to do that, Chairman? Is that what we're agreeing? It's your job to do that?
Well, if I'm requested to do it, I haven't been consulted. No. Catherine.
I'd like to know, Chairman,
No, hang on.
in
It's
resolving
hang on,
objections.
Catherine. It's with Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say it's obviously not just the Western villages either. I mean, I know my parents live in the Sands, which is actually in Guildford Borough Council. And, you know, when I lived in the Sands, I viewed Farnham as my town.
Yes,
and they're not being consulted at all. So, you know, I think one of the things that we discussed in some of the area meetings that we had recently that the Surrey councillors organised was the fact that, you know, we needed to reach out to the parishes in the villages around the town to sort of say, what do they want and what do they need?
I do think the Sands happen to have the portfolio holder as their divisional member.
Just do, yes. Yes.
So they're a bit spoiled.
Maybe.
I would like to think anyway. Jerry, you wanted to say?
Just a matter of the objections, because of the process. If we're agreeing here, we're saying we're going to consult with our residents ourselves, which I'm fine with, because I think we can do a reasonable job of that, but and fair job of that. But if we've already agreed that for the TRO to go forwards, is there any delay in that in order that it can take into account the results of our consultation? And then if we get objections, which no doubt there would be some, will they be made public so that we as ward members or division members can be aware of what has been said, so that we can ensure that mistakes aren't made?
Jerry, if I could just interrupt you. Little 4 is the standard wording that we use for all such things. So this is not unusual, but every time when we're doing something like this, we always put the equivalent of little 4. So this is absolutely bog standard.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm aware of that. I'm asking a question though.
Well, depends. I mean, if something has to-
would we be aware, or are these secrets? I mean, I don't know what normally happens.
Well, we
with them
don't
because-
circulate it to the rest of the council generally, except, you know, because these are, the purpose of this is to get a quick response. Otherwise things die, is what generally, that's the reason for doing it this way. And that's,
That's
it's
a
the
no.
normal behaviour. So if we want to change the way that we deal with everything on the roads and the rights of way in this respect, then we need to debate that, because some of it's statutory and some of it's our way of achieving what the statute's trying to achieve. But that's the same term, same words.
Absolutely, Chairman, you've been very fair, but I please just appreciate that if we're going to shortcut the proper way of doing things that Atkins and Rosper have said, you know, that we've got to do all the consultation and have the public involved from the very beginning. If we're just going to miss that bit out, then I do think that we should have some safeguards at some point in the process to make sure we don't make mistakes. But our greatest asset is the knowledge and ability of our residents, and we do have to respect that.
Somebody has to make a decision. So are we agreeing little 4? Yeah, okay. Little 5. So if that doesn't work, yeah, Mark.
Mr. Chair, can I propose an amendment to 5, picking up on some of the stuff we've
Yeah,
said? Split it, have 2 bullet points. Note that the scheme, sorry, I've got some feedback. Note that the scheme is not exhaustive. And if the scheme, there we are. No, that's okay. I've still got, if the, so the scheme as proposed is not successful, that's all fine. But then add a second point that the scheme's not exhaustive and that other measures will still be considered, because I don't want to leave this recommendation leaving the impression that some of the stuff that we've talked about, particularly for Webber and Batcheltley, is not still on the table. So I'd just like to reinforce that this is not the end of.
I think little 5 is saying if the 20 limits that we have currently proposed individually aren't being honoured, then we'll have to spend some money on some engineering measures.
No, that's fine.
Any additional bits would be built, would get the same treatment when they got to that stage.
I accept that's the assumption. What I want to see is explicit wording okay. that the things that we are voting on now are not the last word in the 20 mile an hour speed limit scheme for Farnham.
No, it's a fair point. You know, that if you decided that you needed to extend, as Catherine suggested, or as Mark proposed right at the beginning,
yes.
Then presumably all the other characteristics would follow automatically.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
Yeah, no, I think that's automatic. It has to be that. So if it becomes part of the scheme, then it's treated the same as all the existing ones.
I accept that, but that's an assumption. What I would just like to see in here is some wording to acknowledge that other other zones are still.
I think we should have a little 6 for that rather than changing 5. Okay. 5 is a generic, and it is also almost statutory. I think. Thank you.
While I'm here, can I just get a little niggle off of my chest, which is that the picture that went up showing Castle Street and the little signs on them that we had earlier for the build outs. I think the wording on the 2 signs was "Welcome to Farnham" on there, and I'm sorry, this is a real itch I need to scratch every time. Farnham does not start at the town centre. Farnham starts on the outer walls.
No, that's a fair point.
And that's a red rag to a bull if you stick "Welcome to Farnham" near the castle.
I think that's a generic that you should bring forward through the normal.
Yeah, it's very frustrating that it has not sunk in.
Go on, you're going to respond.
Yeah, just on the signs, appreciate the comment. The signs we showed on screen are draft designs, will be refined as we go forward, but I appreciate
I anticipated that response is just incredibly annoying that it's still
so the next one was Carol.
I'm just agreeing with you, Chairman. I think we just need to satisfy Mark and all of us really. If we could have another, number 6 to suggest, extensions
I'll
and
propose that in a
amendments.
minute.
Yeah, then I think that
Okay.
would keep us all happy.
Liz.
Thank you, Chairman. It was raised earlier as well about the impacts on air quality and the monitoring of that. And I just wanted to understand within the scheme about being successful in reducing actual vehicle speeds, and that also that it doesn't increase air pollution, and whether or not that should be brought in at this phase, or whether there's going to be any monitoring of the air pollution in accordance with this particular scheme as well.
Yeah, Elaine.
I'd just like to draw attention to, for Farnham, there is the optimised infrastructure plan. So, and that does have objectives and, key performance indicators. So it's part of a bigger programme. It's to be noted, really. So this falls into a lot of other measures.
Can I just ask a supplementary on that? So this is obviously the quick wins stage. However, what if the next phase doesn't happen and we don't have that within here? So I think we perhaps need a catch-all, because whilst I disagree with some of the actual reports and that, and I know there's lots of conflicting advice and knowledge out there. However, I do think that it is important that at this stage, even in this first phase, that an eye is kept on air quality, and I don't want it to be missed. Thank you.
Catherine. No, Catherine, you had your hand up earlier. Okay, Paul.
Just a quick one on from Liz's point. My understanding is there's only one actual air quality monitoring site within Farnham town centre itself. Is there more now? And that's just right.
There's one in West Street,
right.
isn't there?
So in terms of actually getting the measurements to see whether this has been effective or not, there should be some capacity to do that. Yeah. Right. Well, that's fine. That's why I just wanted to double check.
I don't think it'll help you much, because where it is in West Street, the speed is already under 20, way under 20.
Right. Okay.
Is it West Street or South Street? Yeah, okay.
Because this is where we get that ridiculous split between air quality statutory obligations that split partly between Waverley and partly with Surrey.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite a different issue.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just wanted to explore that point of Liz's before it went on.
Carol first.
I was just going to reiterate sort of Councillor Townsend's point. I mean, it'd be very easy just to put in that there, and then it's covered. I mean, it's just saying it's not successful in reducing actual vehicle speed or lessening air pollution, then further measures, or, I can't see why it does any harm. I know Surrey only looks engineering, but, there are other things.
No, but this is a sort of, it's virtually a statutory requirement, little 5. It's just formalising what we have to do anyway. So the air quality thing is also happening, but that's at a Waverley level and organised by Waverley. And it would be up to Waverley if they wanted to do something, but it wouldn't be, this is a necessary part of having the 20 limit. So we're just dealing with the issue of a 20 limit here. We're not trying to do the whole of the Farnham scheme.
Excuse me, Chairman, could I just come back on one little point on that? Again, there's quite a lot of studies done on the 20-mile-an-hour limits and the type of engineering methods that are put in place, which can introduce extra emissions depending on what engineering has been put into place. So speed humps, going around pinch points and things like that. So the 20-mile-an-hour per limit and the engineering measures, not just the signs, which obviously they're just used where people are keeping low speeds anyway, but the engineering methods can have the impact of increasing emissions. That is a fact, of lots of different reports out there. So I think it is important that there is an acknowledgement that the air quality should also be monitored around where these engineering measures have been put in place. And I think that is part of the 20-mile-per-hour scheme. And I think it's important to catch it now, because we don't know how long the other schemes are going to take to come into place. And I think it's important for the sake of residents. And it will be really interesting as well to see the impact on air quality. Thank you.
Catherine.
Sorry, just to say, the current locations of the diffusion tubes that are placed by Waverley in Farnham don't actually monitor all of these locations. So, for example, there is no monitoring point on Waden Road. There is a monitoring point on Upper Hale Road, so we could do comparisons there. And there's obviously the automatic monitoring in the centre of town and a number of other diffusion tubes around the town. So I think although we can do it for 2 of the 3 schemes, we can't do it currently for the Waden Lane scheme. And it would take, they generally want a year's worth of data. So it would delay, if we were going to, you know, have a comparison available, we would be delaying the Waden Lane scheme by nearly a year to do that, potentially longer. If we wanted comparative
Can I just
data.
come back, Chairman? I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that after a year, that if you need a year's worth of data, that you just, the baseline is taken from whatever the baseline is now, pre-engineering structures being put in place, and then it is monitored in a year's time to see whether or not it has had any impact on the air quality.
I think my only concern is that at the moment, as we've mentioned several times, we're in, you know, COVID traffic levels, and in a year's time, unfortunately, I hope not, but it seems quite likely that the traffic will have gone up again.
According to highways, traffic levels are almost up to their previous pre-COVID.
Paul was first, then John.
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Catherine, for that, because that goes back to the point I was trying to make. I don't think that we can say these instantly that these things will have improved or not, because we haven't got measurement across some of these places, and that was kind of where I was going. In terms of having something in here about air quality, though, I will just take everybody back to the reasons that the board was created in the first place, which was in response to air quality concerns within Farnham. So actually referencing back to air quality is something that really should be fundamental to the entire project. So certainly support making sure we have something in there about it. But I do think we need to factor in the point Catherine's made about the fact that we actually can't measure it. So how can we know that these things have improved it when we don't have the baseline data, or indeed any method of measuring some of them?
John.
Well, air quality monitoring has been going on in the town for some years now. There was a bit of a gap a couple of years ago. It's ongoing still. The data will still be being collected as far as I'm aware. And so we can draw the comparisons over the whole period, from start going backwards and going forwards. So it doesn't cover some of the areas like Waden Lane. Whether that's really necessary is debatable, I think, because it's all expensive, but it covers all the critical areas at the moment. So I think we've got enough information. We'll be coming forward. Thank you.
So, members, what do you want to do? Do you want to agree 5 as it is, or do you want to add something? Or what?
Yeah, I support
Yeah.
6.
Are we agreeing 5? It's a note. It's only a note.
As amended,
So
Chairman.
you want it to be as amended? Is that agreed? Well, the as amended says, if the scheme has not been successful in reducing actual vehicle speeds, or it needs to say and or, I think.
It could be whilst maintaining air quality.
Yes, reducing actual vehicle speeds and at least maintaining air quality levels. That's the way to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
No, we've got a legal obligation, Chairman, to bring the air quality levels, the pollution levels down. So we can't insist really that we maintain them. I mean, it may be the word might be prejudice air quality or something like that, rather than we don't want to make a commitment to keep them above the limit. We're not allowed to do that.
Elaine?
I was just going to suggest the word in review air quality data.
Well, yeah, but they want to be more precise than that. They won't buy that. I don't disagree with you. Well, okay, so if it's not successful in reducing actual vehicle speed, well, I really think that you need to say, you know, suppose one of these didn't work, you know, if it didn't reduce, but it reduced the speed limit to where you want it to be, but it happened not to have any effect on the vehicle air quality, then would you want to scrap it? No, all right. Would you want to put in other engineering measures which might damage the vehicle speed bit? Well, you know,
and contributing to a reduction?
but it may or may not have an impact on the air quality. So I mean, there are often lots of different objectives. Sometimes they work together and sometimes they may not. As long as we're cognizant of both or all of the types of objectives that the FIP is trying to get to, then that's surely okay. I don't think we throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it just says that we'll review it effectively, if I've understood that correctly.
Yes, Chair, it just says additional measures may be necessary. Well, that's just a statement.
Well,
of fact.
that's a semi-statutory requirement. That's the reason for saying that. But the air quality is not a semi-statutory requirement. It's a different statutory requirement, not related to engineering measures per se. I mean, this is how the stuff's come from the Department of Transport. What it says is that in a 20 limit, if you're not getting the speeds down to 24 or below, then you have to take further engineering measures.
Well, why don't you just take out the word engineering?
Well,
further measures may be necessary.
I think this was trying to cover their legal requirements.
Okay.
Which, I mean, that's what it does. It's worded in a way which meets the engineering requirements. Now, if we add in the question of air quality, we probably need to make it separate, actually, on reflection.
Well, can we have a 6 and a 7?
Yeah, we'll have a 6 and a 7. Yeah, then we can all go home before we get too hungry. All right. So okay. So little 6.
So, Chairman, could we agree number 5?
Yeah, let's agree. Shall we agree 5 as it is? Yeah. Okay. Right. So then we have a little 6 that says if the scheme has not been successful in
contributing to improvement in air quality.
That's a good phrase.
Contributing to improvement in air quality.
Yeah. Yeah, because there may be other things going on at the same time. Yeah. Then what?
Then further measures?
Further measures may need to be considered, yes. So keep that open as to what sort of...
We want to cover other areas.
Switch off your engine
of
before you
Webb
enter
and
the
Bagshotley and everywhere else.
Electric cars only. So there are various possibilities to pick, which we can't predict now because it'll be sometime in the future. Okay, so would we agree to that little 6? Okay, then little 7, right, it wants to say further extensions to the 20-mile-an-hour zone may be necessary as a result of future further consultation. Oh, you do it that way around? Yes, okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. This scheme does not preclude possible extensions to the 20-mile-an-hour zone as a result of further analysis.
Chairman, you can't really use the word zone in that context because specifically zone means where there's traffic.
No, it's a
calming.
Technical term. Yeah, you're quite
yes,
right.
Yeah.
30-mile-an-hour limit area.
Well, that means there's no measures.
20-mile-an-hour
But that means there's no engineering measures if it's called a limit. It's just signs and repeaters and roundels on the road.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, can I just clarify something because the Annex B, which page 18, does use the word zone. So I'm tying my brain's tying itself in knots trying to figure out the difference.
It is referring to a scheme which has 20-mile-per-hour signs and roundels and engineering measures.
Gotcha.
If it's a zone, the limit means it hasn't got engineering measures. So that's and that's where you're bringing things down from more than 24 mile an hour, etc.
So can we make little whatever number it is now, say limits and zones then? Yeah.
Yeah, limits
fine.
and zones. Yeah, so it can be whichever it is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Chairman, can you just repeat that very slowly to me?
Say what you've got so far.
So further extensions to the 20-mile-per-hour limit stroke zone may be
necessary following further consultations. Does that mean what we want to do? May be considered following further consultations. Yeah, necessary is wrong because. Okay. Are we all happy with? We all happy with that little 7? Agreed. Good. That completes item 8. You'll be glad to know. Michaela's still there, yes, good. Yeah, I know.
Can we look forward to bringing 20-mile-an-hour zones to all the other areas of and putting you lot
Mine's
through
in the
this as well?
waiting.
Look, only when you found the money. Oh, really? Good. Well, then you can bring it forward to the local committee. So item 9 is, have you seen little diagrams about this? Michaela, would you like to tell us a bit more? Mike. Start again.
It's a new pedestrian crossing island is proposed on the A325 Street, Recklesham. It's strongly supported by local residents. It was actually brought through by the Recklesham Residents Association. And we look forward to being delivered quickly and on time. That's all I need to say, I think.
Just for my information, because I couldn't see from the diagrams, if you go to Bumps and Scuffs and I want to take the bus back into town, you know what I mean by Bumps and Scuffs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it near a town or further away from town?
Slightly nearer town.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. Okay, I'm in favour.
Slightly. I think it's like that much nearer town.
On the map. Yeah. The scale to be determined.
Thank you.
Okay, so does anybody want to criticise this at all? We're all in agreement? All agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And so we go on to item 10. That's part of the agenda documents. Was there anything anybody wanted to raise on that, Paul?
So I'm just making sure in terms of the actions that we captured as part of the informal session regarding ideally some kind of phased approach to the discussion of HGVs on some of these
the area-wide proposition.
Yeah, because actually I think personal view here, and hopefully this would have some support. If we were looking at wider, I wouldn't want to have that particular issue that was identified today kicked further down the road. So if we were looking at a wider study of this, could we at least try and deal with that first action in reasonable pace? I mean, have we got an action that actually addresses this issue that was raised earlier?
Well, it's been responded to, see, so we're negatively, except insofar as the proposition was that it should be replayed, you know, that there should be a wider area study to work out what the effect is, or to consider what the effect would be on other other sections of road.
Is that effectively, I know it's not number 2 on here, but as effectively that then replaced the original determination of the previous incarnation of the local committee to actually just do it? Because it was going to do it, and then it came back with comments that there wasn't sufficient funds, which were related to Dunsfold, which I think we all agree is a nonsense.
Well, there were other objections as well. That wasn't the only objection. It was a wider objection than that. But yes, I think it does replace it. We want to have a wider area review.
Right. Can we put a time frame on that then that doesn't make this drag into the next century, as these things often could?
Tiny bit tricky in the current state of the highways
agree.
department.
Indeed, I accept that. I think we certainly need an update with a time frame from highways.
Well, yeah, we have an update for the next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. Can that specifically include
can we
a
put
proposal
that
of a time frame from highways though? Yeah.
Okay. So far, Liz.
Can I just ask, Chairman, in that, can we also include any reports that were done on the HGV trial? Because that was quite well advanced, and I think it would be good for members, especially those that haven't.
You mean the one that was further over?
Seen, yes.
Well, mostly Mole Valley.
Well, it was Mole Valley, and then coming over towards Cranley and Shamley Green, and that part in the other part of the county, which does exist. I think it would be useful because it would highlight certain issues and problems that were highlighted in those reports. Thank you.
So why don't we say that this should include the relevant interactions with the study for the area further east? It had a name, but I can't think what the name was. So we just put it like that. That says what we mean. Yeah, Catherine.
So I don't know whether all members are aware, but you can now set up community HGV watches, and Surrey County Council are appointing an officer this month, I'm told. We've established a group in North Farnham to check on the implementation on the existing roads, but also to look at the new HGV ban that's coming into effect. And I had a very useful conversation with Surrey officers about how that came about, with some work that had been done in Chobham. And we are actually going to start by writing as a community to the HGVs while we're waiting for the Surrey officer to be in place. And I did wonder whether it's worth recommending that that's done by the village that we discussed earlier, because apparently in Chobham it did have quite a significant impact on reducing the number of HGVs through the village. And that was without a ban being in place, but just working on the basis of the fact that the HGVs going through the village were having a very negative impact on the villagers. And I'm told it was very effective. I don't know.
And in this case, this part of Waverley, and Kevin, I'm sure can comment too, has had a lot of interaction with the HGV drivers and with the various companies that are employing them, and have got nowhere. So this is our, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm certainly going to investigate what you've suggested in terms of this new process and the new officer involved in it, and I'll put them in touch with those residents. But they have been through the works on this, I would say, over the last decade or so.
Well, whoever finds out about this new officer, could you let Joe and me know at least, and we'll circulate it.
Yeah, I can circulate the details I have, because I've
But you
got
haven't
quite
got
a lot.
But there's no name yet.
Well, not yet, because it's all
just
tied
doing
up in
this,
this reorganisation.
Quite. Liz.
I was just going to say, you know, Catherine, that's a really good point to make, and something that we can look into. But over on our side of the borough, the county, we have very few main roads. We've got the one A281 and nothing else. So when we displace traffic off of one tiny rural road, it goes onto another tiny rural road, exactly. And therefore that we can't, you know, I would be uncomfortable with just looking at two areas. But we also have to be very aware that we also have businesses and an economy which needs to thrive as well, and you know, the impact on businesses as well needs to be taken into account. But it is a much more complex issue than just, I'm afraid, these two areas. But I wouldn't want to see it slipping any further, Chairman, because it has slipped for a while.
I agree.
I would just say that there is a huge concern that's been raised around the HGV ban that's being implemented in North Farnham about displacing traffic onto other roads in North Farnham, which are as narrow as the roads you have on this side of the county, but have houses right next to them, you know, and it's it's a complex problem. I absolutely agree.
That's why we want to look at a
which
wider
is why
area.
we want, and then that's why the HGV watch has been set up, is because they're concerned about the impact on the wider area. It's unfortunately the same issue.
Okay, so that's all noted. Yes.
That's all noted.
Is there anything else on the tracker that anybody wanted to pick up on? No, I'll say no quickly. Okay, forward programme. Well, we've just added one item to it, and yes, and other things will turn up, I'm sure. So, yeah, Jerry.
Chairman, could someone please remind me of the arrangements for making changes to on-street parking orders? For instance, if you've got full-time like camper vans or whatever parking in a road and being there all the time, because there's no restriction on them, and if residents wanted to have a change so that vehicles had to leave and come back again or whatever,
you write to the parking review team.
Is there a time limit, because it's an annual thing at the end of the year rolling, isn't it?
But there are break points. The break point moves around, so it's difficult to say that. It depends how quickly they finish the previous year's work, which should be happening now. No, it should be just about finished by now, actually. It's supposed to be done July, August, and then they start looking for the new.
Will it be coming to our next meeting? Is that?
He's intending to bring the, what he's got so far, because he has a guillotine sometime about now, so that he can go off and do the white lining from before. So what he's collected so far, he will intend to bring to the next meeting. That's what he's planning to do.
Sorry, what was the officer's name? I've forgotten.
Well, you might to look up parking review team on the on the website,
Thank you, Chairman.
just in case it changes. Anything might happen at the moment. Yes, Paul.
Sorry, apologies. Item 5 currently on the list is requesting signage at Brighton Road Junction in Godalming. It's in the sort of hinterland between mine and Councillor Rivers' division. It says here that the Road Safety Working Group is now due to look at the junction shortly, and this action was March 2021. Could I request an update on this track as to what actually happened with that before I took office, I suspect? But
yes, quite.
thank you.
That's, yeah, so if you send that to yeah, it'll be Frank at the moment, yes, but it's copy Adrian as well. Yeah, okay. Anything else? Okay, in that case, yes. Yep. Yeah, yes, actually, that's a good point. Before we close the meeting, I'd just like to mention that Yvette Ortel has retired. She's not been well in general, but she also got the COVID. She's got the long COVID, and the combination is not good. And you know, she wasn't that far off retirement anyway. And she's a lot older than I thought she was. To be quite honest, I was quite shocked when she told me how old she was. And so she's opted to take early retirement, and she's done a pretty good job at keeping a fairly difficult bunch organised, because we're in different environments around the Waverley, and so we all have different views on the world, don't we? Inevitably, and I think she's done a pretty good job of looking after our business over quite a long time now. And I think perhaps it would be nice if you suggested that I wrote a note of thanks to her to that effect. Yeah, Carol.
No, that's exactly what I was going to suggest. I mean, I've written to her. I'm sure other people who've known her have written to her. She was absolutely terrific. She was one of those officers that you really remember. And she did always go that extra bit. She was absolutely lovely. So, yeah, I thoroughly support your suggestion that I suggest to you, yeah. that you write, because yeah. she really was a superb officer.
Jerry?
Thank you. I'd echo that, Chairman. She was a superb officer, but could you please be extremely careful referring to her age, because she shares exactly the same birthday as I do.
I didn't realise you were so touchy, Jerry. She obviously wasn't, or she wouldn't have told me. I didn't ask the question, she told me. So there you go. Okay, so I'll certainly do that. And so then at this point, date of next meeting, 12th of November, here. You know, you won't need, hopefully by then, Carol may not need to put her mask on before she goes out the door. Well done. And I declare the meeting closed, and thank you all and the officers for taking us through a difficult topic.